Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our podcast series where we bring very exciting guests. And for today, we have one guest from the digital adoption platform community, which is one of the hottest trends right now in the digital transformation space. So we are going to dig into that. We are going to have a lot of fun discussing this more from the macro micro perspective. Just to give you some more background overall in terms of the show. So this is going to be the interview series that we do every Friday, anywhere from 8 a.m. to roughly 11 a.m. depending upon the time zone of the guest. Sometimes you need to make sort of the adjustment. We have had a lot of guests. So if you have not checked those episodes, you might want to go back and check. And next week we are interviewing one more guest. And if you have any sort of questions, comments, we typically cover them first. So make sure you guys are posting your stories, questions, comments. On that note, I am going to pass it on to Krishna for his intro. Krishna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, Sam, great seeing you again. We've been chatting on and off for the last year or so always happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunities, and hi to your audience. Very excited to be here today.
Okay, amazing. So thank you so much once again. And from my recollection of the conversation, I think we have had a bunch of panels as part of our Inside Gem community. And I remember that you're a highly intelligent guy, super informed, with your commentary. So obviously we want to hitch on the whole industry and the DAP and how the space is evolving. But before we do that, we have one of the questions that we ask every single guest, okay? And that is sort of the overarching theme of the podcast. So what is your perspective on business growth?
Very, very tricky and question. I mean, there's an obvious answer. Obviously, the market is comparatively very slow right now. I guess it's for, especially if you are a technology company, a growth stage company like us. The golden days that all of us enjoyed during the COVID high is definitely not there. But at the same time, Sam, I do want to say this, that over the last 2 quarters, we are actually seeing a very positive uptick momentum, which is pretty good, right? So, again, as a growth stage founder, it's very important for me personally that, we're seeing the growth. The macroeconomic conditions are still, the economy is a little bit of, doom and gloom for some sectors. But I would say those technologies that actually enhance productivity, and those solutions that actually add to more productivity, adaptability, which we'll talk more, therefore overall will result in reduction of operating costs or investment costs or capital costs for industries and companies, are definitely getting embraced more, and we are fortunate that we are in that category. So we are seeing a little bit of a positive uptick momentum. But talking very closely to our investment community and fellow portfolio companies, people are still not super happy with how things are going. So hopefully it will change pretty soon.
Yeah, and at least you are being honest, because that is not something I get from the technology community. They are always like, "Hey, there's a boom of technology." So this is great.
I mean, there's a boom, but I don't know if the boom is because of explosion.
Yeah, I mean, technology has always been, unless you are just running the show. What is that phrase called? Keeping the lights on, I guess, in the IT community, keeping the lights on, right? And the kind of products, the space that we are in, we are definitely not keeping the lights on. We are sort of part of the discretionary spend category. And obviously, we are going to be the first one, to sort of decide if companies really want to invest in that. But obviously, I mean, we like to touch on as part of this show is overall value creation, financial value is what we really like to understand, right? So as part of the digital adoption platform, I have been part of this evolution for a long time, I guess. Seen pretty much everything, and I don't know whether you relate this with more of the BPM category. I think that was sort of the, I don't know whether that was a precursor to the DAP platform, but maybe describe what a digital adoption platform is, where it came from. So give us some sort of history lesson where it came from and where it is today, maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as with any other technology solutions, as talking to many sectors out there, digital adoption platforms, in short for DAP, are evolving, and with AI infusion, they're evolving very rapidly, and we're all keeping up with the pace of that evolution. But if you go back, where digital adoption platform started and what was kind of the root. So again, for some of the audience who are probably maybe hearing for the first time, um, the term DAP was coined by one of the pioneers in our industry, WalkMe, which was recently acquired by SAP, which is exciting news for all of us, right? So a big validation that these solutions are important for the companies, for productivity gain and stuff. So therefore, so it started as a rebuttal to traditional L&D, right? So traditional learning and development, if you go back 15 years, and surprisingly or not surprisingly, it's still the case for some of the large companies that they use very traditional methods of training, onboarding, and handling the change management, be it basically web-based training, or be it heavily influenced by some sort of static training or support mechanism and all that. While there is some merit to it, right, it has served its purpose. With the abundance of software, right? So now obviously SaaS is everywhere, and even in a large organization, small teams can now go and buy their own tool for the department, and there's too many softwares, too many number of applications, so there's no way the traditional method of training, onboarding, and handling the change management is scalable. So DAP, in a sense, how it started was as kind of a new way of bringing users on board to the technology. And what is this new way is basically, it's just sort of like using the Uber analogy, right? Everybody knows, everybody has been using taxi for decades. Before, all what Uber did was basically brought the taxi to you, right? And then it personalized the experience. And DAP did the same exact thing, right? So the learning experience, which was being run by a small group of people within L&D, one size kind of fits all, to hey, learning is very personalized, and adults learn by doing, and therefore bring the learning to them, to their application, to their screen, and personalize it. And how do you personalize it? With almost like a GPS type of step-by-step instructions on what to do, how to do, and if they do something wrong, nudge them to do the right thing. That's how it started, as an overlay technology to help the users to get onboarded. Since then, obviously, what was about 7-8 years ago, Sam, what was DAP Tool's primary objective, which was just to teach users how to use the software, to where it is today. It's a full-on change management and digital transformation suite, right? That includes onboarding, training, support, bringing users up to speed in the new application, and data quality management, process compliance, and so on and so forth. So the evolution has been tremendous, right? Kudos to all the players in the category. Very healthy, positive competition among us really pushed the category forward. So what started as a new way of teaching users now has morphed into a full-on digital transformation solutions.
Okay, very good. So before we dig further, we have Dan in the room, and I think Krishna, you already know Dan. And guys, if you don't know Dan, please follow him. Amazing guy. Very well involved in the ERP community. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining in. Krishna, one of the comment that you made during our discussion is you are looking at this more as the L&D. I did not think in that direction, to be completely honest.
It started as an L&D.
Interesting. So so I'm going to have some follow-up comments there, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel that it has some sort of overlap with the LMS platforms, or if the LMS platforms are going to be evolved and they are going to become DAP, do you see that overlap? Is the market sort of considering them as part of the same category? So maybe describe the correlation, how the market is viewing, how the analysts are viewing, how the bigger enterprise software vendors are viewing, because I'm pretty sure you are probably aiming for acquisition as well, right? So
yeah, I mean,
we all are, right?
But I mean, I would rather, explain it as not. I wouldn't think it as an overlap between two different solutions which do the same thing. But I would rather consider DAP as a very good complementary to what L&D does, right? So L&D does certain things and it does certain things very well, like offline learning and all that stuff. But more and more, again, as we just talked about a few minutes ago, because the organizations have 10x more number of apps than what it used to be 15-20 years ago, right? So now every department had their own solution. They can just simply go get an approval for a small PO and have their own whatever resource management software, project management software, or task management, whatever it is. And the number of applications that a typical organization has almost quadrupled in the last 15 years, right? At the same time, a typical enterprise employee is now using at least 4 to 5, in some cases upwards of 7 different applications to just get the basic job done, right? On their day-to-day life at work. So therefore, a traditional L&D method of training users just to teach them or just to get them into some sort of a training fashion is not scalable, is not productive anymore. So whereas DAP, because it's personalized and it goes to the user and it stays on the application 24/7, and it completely changes the dynamic of how an end user gets onboarded to a new application and how the user gets trained. And it's just like, in other words, DAP picks up, the task where L&D leaves it offline. And when it comes to online, being in the app, completely working in an interactive fashion on a live environment, that's the biggest difference, right? So now, eventually, to answer the other part of your question, Sam, will DApps evolve? Will L&Ds evolve as DApps? Very well could be, right? Because we all basically evolve towards what's working, what's getting accepted in the market, and what's yielding more productivity and more mileage for the cost and the effort that is going into the solution. So it is obvious, it is pretty clear to us. Every data point that we ever analyze indicate that the traditional method of learning, support, and change management is getting disrupted big time. And the DAP way, and then now with AI infusion and all, is definitely going to take over. And just in the last 4 years, we have seen a lot of large enterprises that didn't even understand what a DAP tool does. Just the number of sheer RFPs and RFIs that we are answering, almost it's tenfold actually, right? So that it's a good sign. That means they are now considering DApps as a very serious either alternative or a complementary to what they're doing in L&D.
So very interesting. And, so I want to touch on some of the points that you mentioned during this conversation. So number one, who is driving these initiatives? I completely agree with you, overall, that the number of applications that any of the users, I mean, you probably estimated 4 or 5, I would probably estimate 40. Uh, and they are going to have varying complexity in general, with those apps.
Yes.
Yes, I completely agree that change management is a problem. Learning is a problem, of these enterprise applications. That's very, very, very hard, for users to keep up. But, we are going to discuss a little bit more, okay, how the tool is going to solve all of that. I'm looking for a day in the life, scenario of the tool as well. So maybe, provide some follow-ups there based on the points I mentioned, and then we'll discuss more.
Sure. So if we start from kind of a typical day in the life, right? So take a scenario where I'll actually use one of the live example from one of our customers, right? So a large insurance company that uses a CRM, basically to conduct their day-to-day business. Now they have being an insurance company spread across multiple states and in some cases multiple countries as well. Very, very, very large and complex business processes,
Yeah.
right? The same role of, let's say, a director of claims handling and all sitting in Arizona has a very different way of handling those sitting in New York versus Florida, and maybe in some other region in Europe and all. So imagine, I mean, first of all, their CRM and their ERP are integrated, and very complex processes go back and forth between these two systems.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to use a traditional method of L&D, this is exactly what they used to do before AppD came into the company, right? They used to have anywhere from 400 plus to some few hundred support articles or job aids, as they call it, right? Essentially, like if you are from this region, if you
Yeah.
are from this role, and it's the same system that's just configured in a different way. And and the effort that went into maintaining all of that, updating all of that, in a small change basically just causes a lot of those become you know basically useless, right? So they have to do everything again. With the introduction of DAP, the day in the life of, okay, as soon as the user logs in, we know which region they are logged in, what role they are playing. If they're filling up a form, and they're not following the process for that particular department or region, we immediately nudge them to do, because it's all kind of pre-configured or pre-recorded in our DAP environment, right? So now the entire interaction is so seamless for the user. What they used to spend, let's say, up to 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes, just to report a claim or make some comments on claim, is now reduced to minutes. So now if you multiply that across, like almost 15,000 users that use the system in 26 different regions, it's significant amount of productivity saving. I guess Dan has a question.
Yes.
Does the gap? Do you want to read the questions?
Yeah, I'll read the question so that audience also knows what we are talking about. So here, Dan, again, so Dan is saying that, does your DApp have the same UI over different types of applications like ERP, CRM? Does it simply overlay and allow hands-on with the application itself? So I think I was going to have a lot of follow-up questions on that too. So touch on that, and then probably I'm going to ask those questions.
Yeah, so very interesting question, Dan. Right. So the answer is actually it's a bit of both. It really depends on what experience the customer wants to give to their end users, right? So we have customers where before I go there, the solution or the platform itself is very, very, very easy to configure, and therefore you have a control on the end user experience, the UI. Do you want to keep a very consistent UI of DAP across all applications, so they can feel that continuity, right? We have customers who have DAP and their CRM and their ERP and then their HRMS as well, right? So those users that go between these three systems, they get the help and they get the navigation menu and everything from a DAP point of view. That's exactly the same across all three different systems. And we have the exact opposite as well. We have a few customers where they have taken DAP, and because it's very easy, that there's no code involved, you can just change the UI, the pattern by yourself in the studio. And we have some other customers where if you log into their Workday, it looks as if the DAP is native to Workday, right? And if you log into their Salesforce, it looks as if the DAP is native to Salesforce. So you can configure either way. So that's the UI. As far as the user experience goes, like, how they interact with DAP, and what are the steps that they will do to get the help from DAP instantly, that is consistent across all the applications. So I hope I answered that.
Yeah, so very interesting. So I'm going to have some follow-ups there, so that users can relate as well if they have never seen UI or the DAP experience in their life, right? So one of the things, and you can correct me if I'm off here. So my understanding is going to be what DAP is trying to do, and I don't know some of the applications when I log in. I have the self-guided sort of tour available, right? So that is happening across the websites, across different applications these days. When you use an application for the first time, the application is going to say, hey, click here, this is what it means, and based on that you are going to get the next step. Okay, click here now. Sometimes that becomes a little annoying, I guess, but I mean that's useful as well, right? Depending on where you are in your journey. But is that what the DAP experience is overall, the two approaches that you had described between natively versus inside the DAP? Is that similar, different?
I mean, see, the interactive guidance part of the DAP, though that's the most known part to the community, right? So when people think about DAP, they think about step-by-step guidance, right? And there's nothing wrong with it, right? Because that's kind of, the core part of what DAP does, and or at least that's how DAP's evolved, right? So that's where the core solution started from. But like I said, at the beginning of the podcast, DApps have evolved into a full-on digital transformation tools. Therefore, today's DApp technology, be it Apti or any other competitors out there, a lot of them do a lot more than step-by-step interaction and all. Now, when it comes to the interactive guidance, they are very useful for initial learning, right? So when you are launching a new application, you're just going live or just finished implementation, or you have acquired another business, and now you're merging the applications, and then you need to teach a mass number of users and give them personalized learning and training experience. So this interactive guidance and step-by-step guidance is very useful. But usually what happens, Sam, is this will fade away within the first 30, 60, 90 days, or even 180 days, right? So meaning how to get from A to B to C is covered with this, and most of the users know this within the first 3 to 6 months. But where you actually see the value of the DAP is beyond that, because most of the times adoption problems are not from users not knowing how to use the software. Most of the times the adoption problems, therefore the productivity problems, come from the users who know the software but just don't use it, or don't use it right. So they're not struggling with the navigation of the software. They just don't follow the process. They just don't complete the form right, or they don't do it on time, or they do bare minimum, and then they leave most of the fields empty and go. That's where it creates, like, imagine if I have a number of account executives, and I have a Salesforce process that I want them to follow, but most of them don't write the comments, or don't necessarily change the right status, or don't fill up the contextual details that I need to know where the opportunity's health is. It unnecessarily creates a lot of back and forth on Teams and Slacks and doing emails and maybe text messages and all. Where DAP comes into the picture is, because we have already told TAP that, hey, at each stage of the opportunity life, this is the information that is mandatory for the process. It will then nudge the user to do the right thing. You don't have to make all the fields required and all, right? That doesn't make any sense. The fields or the information intake will become mandatory based on where you are in the process life. And that's what DAP can really enforce. And that's where you actually see the productivity.
So very interesting. So what I'm hearing here is two different layers. So I definitely want more colors there. So one is your personalization, right? And the second is the control. right?
Yes.
So when you look at personalization and maybe describe how this is being enabled, I guess, right? So
Mhm.
is it going to be more of the marketing automation sort of flows, in the back end where you are, because you have to model this as well. I mean, it's
Yes.
not supposed
Yes.
to be magic, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah. I mean, somebody has to tell to our solution, what is the right way of, following their process. What is the right way of doing that in the system, right?
Yeah.
And it can be done in multiple ways. One, the most common way, of AppD or most of the dApps in the market is basically every dApp comes with what we call as a studio. We call it a studio. Somebody else maybe call it as editor or whatever. And this is aimed at the SMEs on the customer side,
Yeah.
a business analyst or application owner, a business owner, whoever sitting on the business side who understands the process. They can use this studio to essentially go and just record the process, right? Hey, this is how it should be done, and then just go, if this is the role, this is the process variation, these are the steps. If this is the region, if this is the role, this is the process, these are the steps. Very, very, very simple. That's the most common way of doing it. But obviously, as you can imagine, we are all, evolving with a little bit of machine learning and AI. So now we have almost reached a point where for certain, applications, we can actually use a little bit of an AI, LLM method, where we are essentially understanding how most of the users are doing the process and
Yeah.
standardizing the process from there. And once the SME approves, hey, this is the standard way, or these are the two most standard ways that users should be doing, it automatically enforces that onto other users or ensures the other users are following. So more and more, as we are adding, backend bells and whistles, the entire experience for the user is becoming that much more personalized.
Yeah, and my understanding of this would be that, okay, initially you, let's say, create a model, and if that does not work out, then obviously the process analyst in the back end, they are doing some sort of audit, and they are
Yes.
probably incorporating more steps there to make it even further personalized, I believe.
Yes.
That's what they would be doing, right?
100%.
But overall, going back to the previous point about the control, I guess. So control. So you are saying that, what, obviously the application is going to have its own controls.
Yes.
That the fields that are going to be mandatory, but even though you have those controls, but people are not following, so you are sort of enforcing one more layer, and that layer is going to be subjective based on, I guess,
Yeah, I
people.
think the right way of explaining that is, you take any application, right? let's
Yeah.
let's take Salesforce as an example here.
Yeah.
So for your audience, every company, that use, I mean, I'm talking about mid to large size enterprises. Maybe some SMBs will just basically use Salesforce as is out of the box, but most of the companies will have their own, sales life cycle, customer life cycle, and they'll add more fields or change pages or whatever it is. So they'll essentially configure it to suit their business process, right? Or sales process rather. When that happens, you want to make sure that your users actually follow the process. Now, when you have configured a new form,
Yeah.
if from an application point of view, from a Salesforce point of view, you have very less controls, right? Without heavy customization. So what are
Yeah.
those controls? You can make certain fields mandatory, or you can, basically show certain sections based on some condition. But if you were to handle 10 different variations of the process, within that, within your application customization, you're now talking about heavy customization, writing code, maintaining that code, and all that stuff. So instead, do a generic, configuration that suits to most of your scenarios, but then leave the rest to the DAP. So what DAP does, because we are an overlay on top of the application, you can now go and basically define all those business process rules within the app. You can say, if your AE is coming from Europe region, and in order for them to say it's a sales accepted opportunity, they have to do these 4 or 5 different things. Now, those fields don't necessarily have to be mandatory by Salesforce, but as per your process, they have to fill up those fields. Those you can make mandatory using DAP without writing any code into Salesforce. Now, imagine now doing that differently for North American sales reps, and within North American, depending on what products or what business lines they're part of, you may have a slightly different variation. So the more combinations you have, the more complexity you have to add to your own application, if you want to do everything from your app, or just do a very generic configuration within your app, and rest everything you can do with a low code, no code fashion using that.
So this is very interesting. So I definitely need some more details here. So so I understand that this is going to be an overlay, right? And you are sort of creating the generic model because you cannot create the customized model for every single user. So that's where your overlay is sort of enabling that process. But at the same time, when you are having this control, so I don't know how the how the handshake works in terms of what the application is supposed to do versus what you are supposed to do. Obviously, you are kind of hijacking the login, right? You are hijacking the control flow, overall from the roles permission
I mean,
perspective.
not necessarily, but I'll explain. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So explain. I mean, I'm simply forecasting here. I don't know, what's going on.
Absolutely. So again, an overlay is again, basically it's a complementary solution to what you already have, right? So from an end user point of view,
Yeah.
it's transparent. So if I'm an end user logging into Salesforce, right? I log into Salesforce. There's no login hijack. I'm actually logging into Salesforce. I'm in Salesforce. Now, let's play two scenarios. One is I'm a brand new user to Salesforce. Yeah, I sort of attended a training, but I don't remember, how do I create the opportunity, or how do I create a new lead, or how do I create like a new price book or something like that for this organization. Even if I'm very familiar with Salesforce in general, but this particular company, I'm a new user and I'm not familiar with this process, right? You have DAP right there on the screen. Usually it's a small button on somewhere on the screen, right hand side, left hand side. It's very flexible. You just click on it and say, how do I create an opportunity? Boom, something will pop up on the screen and it will help you. Okay, click here, click there. It'll not only teach you how to create an opportunity, you're actually completing the task on the fly, right? Because you're doing this in your live production environment. So learning by doing on the fly, right? Now, take scenario number 2. 3 months has passed. You are now very familiar with the navigation. You don't need the step-by-step help for navigation and all, but now you are handling 20 different accounts and you have 50 different opportunities that you are commenting and all that. And these 20 different accounts, some are from some region, some are from some other product line or business line. They might have slightly different processes that you have to follow, or these 20 different opportunities are obviously going to be in 20 different stages of their life cycle, right? Now, as you are actually interacting with the system, your business process may require, depending on where your opportunity stage in the life cycle, you have to give the information that's necessary for that process, right? So let's say if I'm early in discovery, I'm only writing my next steps and maybe some potential that what I forecast from this deal and all. But if I'm way further in the opportunity, I have to check a lot of boxes. I have to make sure I've confirmed there's a budget, I've confirmed there's security approval, I've confirmed there's MSA being processed or legal reviews done, whatever it is. So just because I'm in a different stage of the process, now the requirement of providing information has gone up, right? What DAP can do is that because some subject matter expert has already recorded these steps into the DAP solution, me being that account executive, I'm on the screen now. I've changed the opportunity stage from discovery to, let's say, negotiation.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the DAP is now looking at, okay, did this user fill up these other additional 6 fields that are mandatory by the process? If it didn't happen and the user is about to leave the screen or about to hit cancel or whatever, it'll immediately pop up a message or something like that, based on your stage. These 6 fields are mandatory, and it will highlight those fields. And if the user sometimes is not familiar what type of information is required, there is a tooltip that the user can click, or there is a other help article the user. All of this is coming from DAP, and this is coming from the overlay. But the end user doesn't know, right? End user, for all practical purposes, end user might think it's all coming from Salesforce. That's perfectly fine. But this combination of a non-intrusive overlay solution to
Yes.
your application. This combination does the magic for the end user to complete the job.
Okay, very interesting. So we have some more comments here. So I think Dan is trying to, post some of the links for you. So great plug for you.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So can
So
we get a
if
link
you
on?
just go to YouTube and type apti, and apti Workday, apti Salesforce, so there are some demo videos and stuff. In fact, we are actually launching our brand new website today. We are just rebranding, refreshing, and all, and there's a ton of content. The website is apti.io. But if you log in now, you're still going to see our old website. But if you log in like a little later today, by tonight, you will see our brand new website.
Okay, amazing. So we have some more comments. So let's touch on those. So from the demo video, so he already found. So guys, I mean, this is the link that you might want to use as well. Great. And then Apti website description of DAP is here. So it seems like you guys have done a wonderful job in providing all of the details that these guys are going to need. So kudos to you. So now going back to some more questions. So maybe talk about the technology underpinnings, right? Because these things were probably not possible 15 years back, but now you are able to overlay, and overlay is happening some sort of technology advancement. So I don't know whether that is coming from the newer web platforms or what is going on. I mean, where is the overlay coming from that you can hijack the whole model and you can create very similar structure that you would create inside the application? So provide the technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if the very reason why we never heard of DAP 10 years ago or 12 years ago was, though some earlier, players were trying something,
Yeah.
the technology was
Yeah.
not there, right? Again, we tend to forget the history quickly, but, even as recent as 2015, 2016, or 2017, a lot of businesses, they still had Internet Explorer as the primary and the only approved browser, right?
Yeah.
So and it was technically, I mean, very, very difficult, in some cases impossible for you to have any overlay solution. So the evolution of the browsers, obviously Chromium, and now Edge is also Chromium, and Firefox, the basically the flexibility to have web extensions in some cases, or have an overlay, or even segmentation, right? Code isolation, where you're not intruding with the host application, you are just sitting as an side overlay. So for end user, you can you can give both experiences. You can give the host application, let's say Salesforce, in its native form, and then you can also overlay using code isolation, a DAP experience on top of it, right? This was not possible 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and the evolution of modern browsers definitely enable this. And even with the AI and all, we are very, very quickly changing that. We're getting to a place where, again, GPT style help, and bringing all of this experience. See, so far we talked about what DAP does and all, right? Again, the technology was not there before, and now because of modern browsers, we are able to do this, right? Fantastic.
Yeah.
But before we even sink this thing into the ground, I mean, before we sink this technology into maturity, it's already evolving, with AI, with GPT models, with LLMs and all. What we are seeing is a consolidation of end user experience. What is now individual to each application, right? You configure Salesforce help in a different way, Workday help in a different way. So in order for you to get help from a Workday DAP, you have to go to Workday. You have to get, in order for you to get help from a Salesforce DAP, you have to go to Salesforce, or SAP, vice versa, which is good. It still does the job. But again, users want even better UX, and even better, streamlined, simplified UI and all. And Aptis is definitely doing this, and I'm pretty sure other players in the DAP are doing this. Is we are all going towards providing a one UX to the customers, and in fact, we are launching our first version of one UX, or we call it as 1X, Apti 1X, which essentially consolidates the end user DAP experience into one UI, where most of your tasks, not all, but most of your tasks that you otherwise require to log into these applications individually can now be completed using a single UI, right? You basically just log in, whether it's your mobile or your desktop. You log into a 1x app, which has all your organizational help consolidated in a GPT style manner, so it
Yeah.
understands the context. It's not a static help, it's a live help. It basically gets all the process information, everything, and you can ask a question on what is the latest on these three opportunities from Salesforce. It
Yeah.
gives you a human style answer. At the same time, you can also update those opportunities directly from within 1x and only go to Salesforce for advanced tasks. And when you do go to Salesforce, then the traditional DAP is already there to help you. So those are now interconnected. So that's kind of what we are seeing as the next stage in DAP.
So that's very interesting. So, and I was not thinking in this direction, to be completely honest. Okay. So let's say if Chromium or the newer browser, and my throat is killing me right now, I guess.
Yeah.
So I apologize for that. So if Chromium or the newer browsers and the newer technologies are enabling this experience, and I was thinking that you are doing something similar to it, RPA, where you are sort of hijacking hijack. I mean, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, we are not
mean
hijacking anything, but I
more in
understand
the
that.
negative, fashion. I'm describing the technology that, okay, you sort of hijack the whole UI model, and then on that you are trying to either operate, interact, and again, I didn't mean hijacking more in the negative,
Yeah,
sense.
no, I understand.
Yeah, so here, you are sort of taking over the control, from the UI perspective. That was my understanding, that's what you would be doing to enable the DAP experience.
Yeah.
But here it seems different, because now you are saying that this is happening inside the browser. If this is happening inside the browser, and browser is what is causing the overlay, then what happens to my on-prem apps? Is this only going to be applicable to cloud-native application? Is this
No. Actually, we have quite a few on-prem customers. So the only requirement is how your end user interacts with your application, right? So if it's a purely native web, desktop style, like that number of applications, as you know, right? So now about 95% of the apps are all web apps, whether it's hosted on-prem, whether it's hosted cloud, whether it's a hybrid deployment. How you actually as an end user launch this application, as long as that's browser based, the dApps work. And there are certain dApps, we are not playing in that space yet, but there are definitely certain dApps that are trying to get this experience to static desktop applications as well, like the old ways of launching Microsoft Word or Excel or something like that. But if I have to be honest, that number of applications that still launch from the desktop as a desktop app without browser is very minuscule and very specialized apps. So we are concentrating obviously on the partner market.
Yeah, so very interesting. So I have one more question there, and I'm simply curious here, right? Because we had seen some challenges with RP as well, and they do very similar things. I'm not going to say they are similar technologies, but they are doing similar things, right? So I don't know how you are enabling this. I don't know whether you are reading the fields, and based on which you are actually doing this, or are you doing more of the position based? Because you have to read something, right? I mean, see, if you are creating the overlay, you have to do something, right? And with SaaS, the models changing all the time. So let's say you create a model with DAP. So have you seen any sort of challenges there because of that?
We used to see a lot of challenges, right? So in the beginning, again, obviously the way dApps interact with the applications, and if I may use a little bit of a technical jargon here, for us, when we see an application loading into the browser, we call that as DOM, right? Document Object Model, right? So DOM describes how that application is basically layered into the browser, right? So like, what sort of indexes, what sort of, fields it has, the CSS elements it has and all. And for me, it doesn't matter what application is loading, whether it could be Salesforce, Workday, custom app, whatever the app may be, right? As long as we understand the DOM well, and I'll explain that in a second. What do I mean that, right? So as long as we understand the DOM well, we can overlay on any application. And there are certain applications that have very easy and simplified DOM, like simple CSS structure and all. And even if it changes frequently, we have enough anchor points on the screen to understand, okay, basically it's a small change where the button moved from left to right, or where it's a very small change that this field was here before and now it's under a new section.
Yeah.
Any of those type of basic foundation level changes doesn't bother us, right? So it doesn't cause any disruption to end user experience when they're getting step by step instructions and all. But certain applications sometimes just completely change the UI. It's
Yeah.
like a model upgrade of a car, right? In that case, we used to, not anymore,
Yeah.
but we used to run into problems, right? We either had to go and recreate the content and all. It was not technically impossible, but it used to take effort. Now the good news is, with evolution of LLMs and everything, we are now able to actually do DOM abstraction. So when we do
Mhm.
DOM abstraction, obviously keeping in mind that there is no PII data, there is no sensitive data. We are only looking at the metadata, right? So when you open a Salesforce, let's say this Salesforce is for a large bank, right? Um, if we were to get all of their data and process on our side, certainly it would be a big security nightmare, right? So we don't want to do that. But for all practical purposes, what we care about is how is their Salesforce screen structured,
Yeah.
where are the fields, and we just basically look at the metadata tags, like there is a name field, there is a opportunity closing date field, and all that stuff. And this each field on the screen will have a metadata tag, right? A CSS element or a
Yeah.
ZS, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And our LLM model basically looks and models it, and it keeps in the memory. And if there any change happens, right, it quickly highlights that yesterday I had this copy and today I have this copy, and these are the four things that changed. And now the models are evolving where it can self heal, like
Yeah.
meaning if there was a balloon that was attached to this one of the element that changed, and because it has seen that page multiple times, it can say, okay, if I move the balloon from this to this side of the screen, without basically changing the context, it'll just go ahead and move it, right? So that again, our goal is to get to a place where the DOM changes shouldn't bother the end user experience. We're not, I want to be, transparent here, right? We're not perfect, but we are 70-80% there. And I know each of our DAP players in the market are trying different ways. We are very confident about the way we are doing, using AI-based DOM abstraction and stuff. A lot of early positive results and stuff. And somebody else is claiming they can self heal, but again, it's never going to be perfect, right? It's not meant to be perfect, because if you go and change the entire facade, yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to do some rework anyway, right?
Yeah.
But it's still significantly very, very low effort compared to
Yeah.
you redoing all of your training material or creating a new LND library and all that. It's nothing close to that.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And nobody's perfect. I mean, technology is not meant to be perfect. There are always going to be challenges with technology.
Yes, yes.
So they need to get used to it. So I have some more questions related to that. And some of them, I'm going back to my on-prem, systems, because, and you can tell us a little bit more, I guess. And for people who might not be familiar with DOM, DOM is going to be almost like a structure that you have inside your browser
Right.
that instructs your browser how the structure of your screen is going to be. Okay, so it is going to have all of those fields and the design, etc. That's probably for layman. But let's say when you are looking at it, I don't know how these on-prem applications are doing, because they have definitely taken a lot of shortcuts. Not everybody understands, including me. I mean, it's very hard for me to understand, even though I have been in the technology world for a very long time now. But in some cases, when I look at let's say if you are going to do view source, from your browser, and guys, if you don't know this, you can look at the HTML source that you are going to have, in the browser, and that is going to be a little bit of DOM. I mean, DOM is probably going to have more underneath, but you can look at a lot of things, that you are going to have in that, right? So when you look at some of these on-prem applications, when you look at the source, you just don't have anything, I guess, there.
I mean, again, for what we need, you have enough, right? So obviously, if you go beyond a certain layer,
Yeah.
when you self-host, when again where the controls are pointing to where the network traffic is going and coming from is your proxies and your own network and your own firewall and stuff. But we don't go to that level, right? We don't need that level because again, at the end of the day, I'm an overlay solution. For an overlay solution, all what I need is what is the URL that I
Yeah.
need to have my DAP up, number one, and number two, once the URL loads, once the DOM loads, you know where do I put my pre-constructed
Yeah.
instructions to, right? I have been asked to bring a balloon on the home button. Is the
Yeah.
home button there or not? Or I've been asked to bring a balloon or a tooltip on let's say a new button. Is the new button there or not? Now, for us, whether it is a on-prem application or whether it is a cloud or hybrid, like I said, the deployment doesn't matter, right? As long as it's a web-based application and they're using a browser to interact with the application, the level at which we interact with the DOM, we have enough information. But to your point, if you go to the deeper level of network traffic and where it's getting the data sourced from and all, that's entirely different between a cloud native application to an on-prem application. But we don't go to that level. We don't even touch that.
Interesting. So we have some more comments here. So we have Bill Palevka. If you don't know him, you should definitely follow him on LinkedIn. Very interesting guy. He's working
I do.
in the data space. You already know Bill. Yeah. I mean, 90% of the people on LinkedIn probably are going to know him. Super popular. Okay. So here he's saying, just joining in, playing a little catch up to the discussion. Seems like a great conversation. Thank you so much, Bill, for that comment. You are very kind. Is this RPA? I don't know if you want to address this. I don't think it is
Yeah,
RPA, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get this question all the time, right? Bill, this is, DApps are not RPA, but DApps are capable of complementing the RPA and vice versa, right? So, if I can maybe just explain in simple, like layman terms, DApps enable the users and DApps teach users how to interact with any software, help them in following the process and stuff. But if they want to actually automate any of that process, that's where the RPA comes in. So it's a perfect basically handshake between what DAP can do, how far DAP can go, and then hand over the control to RPA. And we have some customers who do that too.
Okay, very interesting. So we have some more comments. So let's just touch on those. So I think he's confirming on one of those comments. And then he's saying this seems to be able to help establish process that train people on processes.
Exactly.
Very cool. So Bill gets it. I mean, he's very, very, very technical. Is this just for Salesforce or any type of software? Sounds like a really great way to automate gate review processes.
Any web-based software. Again, the solution itself is platform agnostic. As I was saying, earlier, basically the solution is built to work on any web-based technology, right? As long as you use a browser to launch, it could be Salesforce, it could be Workday, or it could be CNN or Yahoo.com. It doesn't matter, right? So you can just create these instructions, or you can create this interactive guidance, and therefore the process controls on any app that the end user uses a browser for.
Okay, so very interesting. So I'm going to have one more question on this question itself, related to different platforms, because when I compare, and I'm going back to the whole view source analogy, inside browsers, right? In general, the .NET applications, and that's probably going to be 90% of the ERP applications, because ERP world is very UI, windowy.
Right.
They have always been like that, right? And now they are getting a taste of, cloud native applications. And, in 90% of the cases, how I have personally seen is, it almost looks like a TV, as if a TV is running inside a browser. When I look at view source, I just don't have the same structure that you are going to find inside your cloud
Yes.
native applications, right? So
Yeah.
have you seen any sort of differences between the
Yeah. Yeah.
.NET,
I mean,
or are
we
those using the same React, Angular these days, the kind of HTML5 technologies?
Absolutely. I mean, we come across all kinds of DOMs, right? All complexities. Again, when we come across a simple DOM where all what we have to deal with just a first layer of CSS, that's like the best day we have, right? But when again, there are two ways to think about it. One is, if we are coming across an application or an application type for the very first time, we just have to learn the DOM, right? Like, it's all automated. There's nothing that, there's no implementation, or there is no technical work involved from the customer side. We basically have created a proprietary software. It just basically goes and understands the DOM structure, like, how the classes are set up, and how the index is working, and how, and sometimes, we have nested iframes, or single page applications, or shadow DAMs, as we call. So we just want to understand how it is, and it's a quick 10-15 minute analysis of the DOM, and based on that, it'll just spit out a configuration that we then attach to that particular DAP instance, right? And again, the more applications that we are interacting with, the better we are making our algorithm. But for applications that we have already seen, then we already know how it works. Like, again, all the basically the usual suspects, and the very well known apps, the ERPs, the HRMs, and obviously the CRMs, and all, about 200 plus applications DOM we are very, very, very familiar with. But still, we come across with brand new applications sometimes, and we recently came across with an application that was built almost 22 years ago. They're still using it, right? They're just like changing some UI here and there, but the core has been built almost 20 plus years ago, and they still have code that has not been updated once in like 7-8 years. So a lot of interesting learnings there. Certain classes and certain elements don't even respond to the modern way of abstracting the DOM anymore. So we are learning, and we are updating ourselves constantly.
Okay, perfect. So we are close to our time now. Time passes when I'm talking to you, Krishna. Always learning something new from you. So do you have any sort of closing advice for our listeners by any chance?
I mean, I don't know if I want to call advice, but obviously, at the beginning we talked about, how the current economy is impacting the business and all, and we all hope for the best days ahead. There's definitely some slowdown, but like I said, the last 2 quarters have been pretty positive for us. We are seeing, I mean, just in the last 1 month, we have seen a lot of momentum uptick, in number of RFPs, RFIs, and the leads coming in. So, maybe a comment to my fellow growth companies there, don't give up. There's a lot of better days ahead. But for general, audience, if you haven't tried DAP, and if you haven't tried any of the end user productivity or change management or digital transformation tools, or if you have been trying some solutions and you're not fully satisfied, give us a try. You'll be very, very pleasantly surprised, how easy it is to work with DApps to get the productivity out of your users.
And people want to find you, how can they find you? Probably provide some information about that
Yeah,
as well.
so LinkedIn, Krishna Danturi, website is apti.io. Or if you just basically type in Google, Apti DAP or Apti Digital, Adoption Platform, you find plenty of information. And today is the day we are actually launching our new rebrand with our brand new website. It will be live later today. If it's not already while I'm on this podcast. Our team is working day in, day out there. We're very excited, and we are launching our basically the next version of DAP with AI called 1X next month. So we would love for your audience to come and try and leave us a comment.
All right, amazing. So outstanding conversation. Thank you so much for your time and insights. And guys, stay tuned for the next week. As part of this series, we are going to bring another person, and he's probably working in one of the Vista equity portfolio from the PE. So we are going to have very interesting conversation with him as well. On that note, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sam.